I told him to stop putting his hands
I think it's gonna be
All right, we are on the air, and Taylor, I don't know, maybe Brenda too, but I'm fine with this being the number
Yeah.
one item on the agenda every month.
Sure.
I think that's appropriate. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the Community Planning and Transportation Committee for the month of September 2022. We've got 3 items on the agenda today, and we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to move item number 3 up to number 1 if there's no objection from anybody, and get the transit ridership report out of the way. We have Taylor here to give us a presentation.
Yeah, and I'll try to be brief because I know you have 2 other presentations. Just want to point out a couple highlights of the report that you have in your packet. Kind of going through the list. For the Go Norman Transit Plan, we're still waiting on a final cost estimate for the proposed transit center at 320 East Comanche. The architect is working through acquiring all the changes that we need to make to just make the renovation work. And we're hoping to have that in the next few weeks, so then we can prepare bid documents and go out to bid. And the timeline is still about a year to go to implement the route changes. And there will be an agenda item on council's agenda next Tuesday about the public participation process for the route changes. And it's really just letting you all know that we're going to go out to the public, have 2 to 3 public meetings, gain feedback, and then come back to you and say, this is what we learned, this is what the public said, and will you sign off on the proposed route changes, whatever they are at that point. So you'll see that on your agenda on Tuesday. For grants, we have another item on your agenda for next Tuesday to accept a FTA low or no emissions vehicle program grant for 2 CNG 35-foot buses. We got about 70, I think it was 70% of the buses covered through this competitive grant program. And so this agenda item will be asking council to accept the grant, authorization to purchase, and move money around until we get the reimbursement for the buses. And these will be in addition to the 3 buses that we got council approval to purchase last month on the 23rd. So we'll have 5 35-foot buses on the way, in addition to the 2 electric that are coming in the next couple months, and then the 5 paratransit that should be beginning of next calendar year.
7 new buses total.
7 new big buses and 5 paratransit
And
vans.
those 7 buses are almost all paid for through grant funding.
It varies. The very first bus that we got a grant for was through the Volkswagen Settlement Fund, and it could only be 50-50. So it's 50-50, and then the second electric bus was 70-30, 70% federal, and then the 3, like I mentioned, are about 75, 70, and then these 2. We lower, the minimum cost share is usually 80-20, but we usually lower that to 70 or 75 just to be a little more competitive, since it is really hard to get those grant funds, and it's nice to get the 70% rather than have to pay the 100. So.
And it's anticipated that our share of that would come from the transit fund?
Yeah, so every year council allocates money for at least 1 big bus replacement and 1 paratransit unit replacement. And so we try to take those dollars and use those as our local match and show the grant FTA usually that we have the local match in hand, and try to turn those matching dollars into 2, 3, 4 buses. So
Great. Okay. Councilor Studley?
I was just curious if you had any update on the door-to-door via whatever.
yes, we do. It's not in this report specifically, but I was going to update you all that we hired a consultant, H&TB, to help us think through that, because there was some back and forth with council that we had last year about what that looks like. And council allocated, just a reminder, $750,000 for that pilot program, and we want to make sure that we get whatever that service looks like right. So we're going to bring in some experts to help us walk through that. So we had a kickoff meeting with them today, and we are going to look at a study session next month for council to discuss that with H&TB and staff about what that looks like. You'll probably get an email from me or Sean in the next couple of days with a survey. It'll be about 3 or 4 questions, and we'll ask you to just give us your thoughts on what the program would look like, so we can get some direction before that study session.
And is that something, because I know I had asked this before, but is that something that Embark is still willing to look at, like, instead of us hiring somebody
Yeah.
that's already doing it in another city, that maybe they just add some of these types of things to their services
Yep.
so that we can just have one vendor, or should we have multiple vendors for this kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it depends on what it looks like at the end of the day, and we'll bring that into our negotiations with Embark for the upcoming fiscal year. I think we'll try to. They'll of course be a major part of this as our current operator, so we'll see. It may be easier just to bring somebody in as a pilot, because then if we don't do it for another year, we don't have that investment. If we have to make some sort of investment in vehicles or different things, we may be able to bring in a contractor for a year and see how it goes. So I think it'll depend, but Embark will be in the conversation.
I think they're great at doing buses and doing I wish that they could figure out how to get on the current door-to-door thing that everyone wants, so.
Yeah. Well, and just to let you all know,
They are a good partner, you
Embark
know?
is looking at microtransit themselves. As a big city, they can't cover the whole city with big buses. So they're looking at microtransit service in their city as well, and they're asking the same things. Is it in-house? Is it a contractor? What does it look like? So.
Okay. Thank you.
And then the last thing I just want to mention, this is on the second page, is the RTA update. And council approved on September 13th the amended trust indenture for the RTA. It was really about taking out Midwest City, Del City, and more because they opted to withdraw from the district. And Oklahoma City and Edmond are looking to approve that trust indenture as well. It'll be on their next council meetings as appropriate. And next Tuesday, there will be another transit item to appoint an additional RTA director to the board from Norman, because a part of the trust indenture changes was to add a RTA director from each of the remaining cities. So Oklahoma City will have 3, Norman will have 2, and Edmond will have 2 to keep 7 on the board. So you'll see that on the agenda as well. And the last thing I'll just mention is the ridership, and I'm not going to dive too much into the report, but just that first paragraph on the first page, we had about 25,000 riders this August, and that's an increase from last August where we had 22,500, 22,426. But I think the daily ridership tells the story better. We increased from 863 daily passengers in August of 2021 to 905, so almost a 50 more a day, which is a pretty good increase of about 5%. And then year to date, which is really just July and August together, we've transported 45,000 passengers, and last year we've transported 42,600. So again, kind of a leveling off period. We hope to still be increasing, but we're not going to see gains of 10, 20% like we were last year comparing to COVID months. So.
Yeah, it looks like all the routes I've seen an increase, even West Norman, 32%.
Yeah.
Except for Alameda had a slight decrease, but it's a heavy route anyway. So.
Right. It increased a lot since the city took it over. I think the library had a big change to that when we added it to the route. And yes, West Norman did increase, but relative to the numbers that are shown, right? So.
And we got the Social Security back up and running too, so.
Right, and that's why there's an NA there for the comparison, because we just started that in May again.
Okay. Any further questions, comments? Councilor Schuler?
I just want to make a comment about, and just really to say thank you for highlighting all of the things that we'll see coming forward on our agenda next week. Just for clarification on the grant funding, the matching, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's really helpful to see that preview here now before it hits our agenda, because it helps give us a lot of opportunity for questions, but also, I mean, you did a great job of telling us exactly what was coming forward and why we were seeing those things. So I just really appreciate your presentation.
No problem. We may not be able to do that every month, but depending on how the days fall, but happy to do that.
But really appreciate it.
Councilmember Grant?
Who was the other city, or what was the other city that had been looking at the pilot program?
A microtransit.
For microtransit? Well, Embark has, and maybe Dr. Dillon could speak to it more, but is it a part of MAPS 4 that you got funding for microtransit?
Yes.
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 So they're looking at studying areas of OKC that mode would work well in. So they're kind of doing the same thing we are.
And we're also looking at the software, the back-end software
Right.
that we use to run the microtransit program, because it does require a software system. So we're looking into that as well.
Yes. Sorry, Marilyn, I didn't see you there, but when we were talking about the partnership with Embark, that's definitely a possibility depending on how the service would look like if we implemented
Oh, yeah.
something. Yeah.
And you and I actually have to have that conversation next week. So.
Yeah. So.
Very hard to come.
Yes. Conversation's coming.
And before I'm done, I almost failed to mention the RTA staff through their contractor, Kimberly Horn, is going to be in and about the metro to discuss the RTA. If you look at the city's Facebook page, they shared something today about the schedule. So next, I can't tell you the days and times, I've forgotten, but they're going to be at More Norman Tech. They're going to be at the Farmers Market and at the K-State game at a tent. I don't know if they're tailgating or what, but they're going to be there. And so they're doing some outreach next week, and just want to point that out.
Good. Okay, well, looks like our residents continue to be interested in and needing to ride public transit. Our numbers continue to increase from decreases that we saw during COVID, but people have returned. I think there may have been some question about would people be willing to ride public transit after a pandemic, and would people feel comfortable being on a bus with other people? And it looks like in Norman they are anyway. So, so encouraging as usual to see this. Again, anybody listening or watching at home, if you're interested in the public transit system, you're wondering how many people ride the bus. It's a lot actually, and I know some folks think it's zero, but it's actually a lot. And if you're interested in knowing the future plans, the budgets, all those types of things, then please encourage you to attend this meeting or contact us with any questions or comments you have about it. So thank you very much, Taylor. I appreciate it. We'll move on to item number 2, which is a discussion, or item number 1 actually, which is a presentation on the new bike skills course. It's not maybe as new currently, but it's a couple years old now.
I wish.
And really, I've just had, maybe others have as well, but I've had questions about its maintenance, and since we got it, who's taking care of it, and how is it doing now that it's a couple years old, and things like that. If we,
Fantastic.
need to make any improvements or
Well,
like that. So
how do I get bigger on here? Oh, we're good. Hello, I'm James Briggs. I'm Park Development Manager over in Parks and Rec. This was one of our projects back in 2019. This is one of our big openings pre-pandemic. So we were finishing this one up right at the end of 2019. It's actually almost this very day. It's like the last day. We promised our director that it would be done by the end of summer. So the last day of summer we opened it. That was not on purpose, but if you're familiar with Creekside Bike Park, it's over there on 24th and East Lindsay. 2019, Progressive Bike Ramps was our contractor for that. They're the same ones. They're a division of American Ramp Company, who built our original skate park and did the renovation and new build of the Blake Baldwin Park. It bubbled up from the Bike Advisory Committee, which is a subcommittee, I think, of Transportation Committee. So it was something they talked about, presented at Park Board. We were looking for a place to have a bike park. Explored sort of the obvious candidates, maybe Sutton Wilderness, but you can't do that kind of thing over in Sutton Wilderness by state statute. We were just in the throes of doing Ruby Grant. But we had, again, it's no charge for use, but we had this piece of land over on 24th and Lindsay that we'd had for decades. It was sort of a voluntary piece of parkland that came with this neighborhood as it built out. There's all this land that had the creek running through it. But even uphill, we don't own this little sliver right here. If you go over there and look, there's a part that lines the alley right there. It's actually still zoned commercial, and I think the Serbies own it. So you think we own it all, but we don't. There's actually the part where you turn in off of 24th Street that is still privately owned. So we had this land sitting there forever. Has great terrain for something like a bike park. So we toured it with our PBR group and our bike committee, and decided this would be a fantastic place to have a bike skills park. 14 acres, about perfect for doing multiple things. We'd been mowing it for years. The process for the design had some public meetings where we had, it was sort of the turnkey construct, design and build from progressive bike ramps. We had some cyclists come to the first meeting, had a lot more come to the second one, and talk through different things that we wanted to do at the site. And you can see, if you can see, the original proposal was to have a sort of bike playground in this area. Where is it over here? Up, well, you can see the skills area with the kids going through the pipe, essentially. We had a gateway trail, which is essentially the less terrained area that goes through the trees. Bicycle playground. Up by the street, we proposed to add some parking along that. That is not a public street. It is a public alleyway that was built with those when those commercial lots were developed. There's a daycare right there at the bend of the road. There's a convenience store and tattoo parlor and laundry there at the corner of 24th and Lindsay. We wanted to add the parking because we didn't want to put a burden on people looking for somewhere to go. It's in a neighborhood. It's at the end of that square mile where there's also Sunrise Park, Colonial Estates Park, Colonial Commons Park. So there's other public parks with playgroundy kind of things in it. But the design proposed a skills course with some of the, I don't know if you've been out there, I can't get the cursor to appear on that screen. But the jump line you see up there in the corner is something that we built along 24th. The tech skills has several areas you can go up on some elevated wood platforms. There's sort of a little drop zone where you have different levels of being able to drop down onto an embankment and hit a bank wall. All very common things in a skills park, but PBR is very excited about what we had to work with. So you can see, like I said, some of those things that we have there. The path was cleared and built during the summer of 2019 by their crews. A lot of just tree clearing. It's not really single track necessarily, but it is definitely a natural path through the trees and out into the prairie area, and then go to some, like I said, some of the drop areas and the skills park area. We were opening day. It was raining the day we opened it, of course, so we had a few people. There's John from ARC right there in the middle, some of our bike committee. Since then, sort of the update, we've been operating it. It's all free for use. We do daily maintenance on it. Our guys can maintain a trail, and we keep branches trimmed, and if there's places that wash out, we haven't really had a whole lot of washout. We did do a sort of a renovation of the jump line in 2021. We had some funds available. It was all done through room tax. Originally, I highlighted that, but that was just a way to get it funded without burdening the capital fund, because we can, room tax theoretically is collected by people staying in rooms and hopefully drives, projects that help, fulfill its purpose of getting people to come to town. There is a Oklahoma Earth Bike Fellowship. There's some local riders that do a lot of work out at Thunderbird. There's about, I don't know how many miles of single track trail out there. They go and do work days and maintain those. They've also come and done some work on our park from time to time. We will deliver dirt if we need to, but when the additional work was done in 2021, our crews met up with the guys that were doing the rebuild and kind of got some sort of extra training. It's kind of like maintaining a ball field. You tamp it, you bring a lot of dirt, it's a lot of clay, you do a lot of dragging and tamping and that kind of thing. It hasn't burdened us that I know of. Talking to Wade, our maintenance superintendent, it's nothing out of the ordinary for us. We are going to have our first cyclocross event this October. Bike One has gotten with Veronica in our rec division. They're going to have a cyclocross. They are actually going back and talking to these businesses and are getting them to, it's going to be on a Saturday, just kind of giving them a heads up. We're going to have this, do you care if people park in here? I think almost all the businesses have signed off on a sort of a, we understand you're going to be here letter that they've put together. So that's a good partnership with that neighborhood. But yeah, we have the structures in the park have a bit of maintenance to them. These wood features that you see along at the drop zone there. The ones that are built in the dirt don't have as much maintenance except on the, they have a metal frame inside of those dirt hills, but you can see down the far end where you go up into the cradle and all that. We have trade specialists that can work. We actually bought extra material when we bought this to continue to maintain it. We store it because it's big dimensional cedar lumber, thicker than just normal, go buy it off the shelf. But we've had good luck with keeping it maintained, and it's been popular. There's a little bit of give and take. I don't know, we've told the adjacent, the Surveys in particular, that the land there, people are sometimes driving across it They're not supposed to come into the park. We've recommended that if they want to do some sort of, fence along there, it's no sweat off us. We've got plenty of parking along the alley there where we built the parking area. We have rules posted. Things you got to put on bike park signs are things like, no remote control vehicles. People want to go out there, and this is yield to downhill riders, just different things that you have on a skills park. So, saying that, I'm open for questions on what you think of our bike park.
Councilmember Sudley?
So can you go back to the map? Where is the parking lot again? Because I'm trying to.
It's right behind the daycare. I don't know why I can't necessarily. I have no mouse, and I've got it on my screen. It's that blue
Okay.
area right there. Yeah, right by the Gateway Trail. So.
Okay. Because I do see a lot of people parking in the dirt area right
Yeah.
there along 24th. So I've always wondered, is that really parking or is that just somebody pulling up?
No, that's parking. It's closest to the bike playground. The theory is that's where you would unload
Yeah, I think
kids
a
because they kind of
fence,
learn
maybe
how.
a fence of like a chain link fence or something would be helpful, or even some posts or something just to kind of prevent.
Right. The only thing we could fence would be the area north of the Surveys property. We do have a fence the entire length from where their property ends at the alley, going over to where our parking is.
What about just some just a little post or something that's like no parking or no cars here?
Have the surveys complained about it?
No, like I said, I called them and mentioned to them we were opening the park and saying that we're worried that people are going to, but we don't even own that street. That street is just a public alley. It actually belongs to
Yeah.
this.
It's gross.
It belongs to this development right here. So I don't know if transportation-wise, if we can actually even post signs along their property.
Gotcha.
Because as soon as their property ends, right there at the end of that red by the bike playground, we do have a fence that extends to our parking lot. And then there's really no one that drives over on the area that comes up off of Lindsay. So I don't know the answer necessarily, other than we've told the owners, we could go off of their property, north of there where you cross the creek, and post some things along the edge of our property, right there just north of the sort of red trapezoid, and say, no unauthorized vehicles, that kind of stuff.
I would
I don't
just
know.
hate for some of that mud to get washed out because I don't know. I just would assume it's pretty difficult to get packed in there to lay that stuff out. But my other question that I wanted to ask is, looking at this map, are those, because you said that this was the proposed kind of original concept, are those trails actual existing trails
Yes.
currently? And then looking at kind of how some of these pictures are in other parks versus what we actually got, it's a lot different in my opinion. So I'm just curious what feedback is from people who have been out there, or what feedback you've gotten from the community, because I'm maybe not hearing that people were as happy with its turnout as maybe expected, or it didn't.
Oh,
Some of these things look a lot different than what's actually on there.
well,
And I know these are examples from other parks.
Those
it's
are,
like
but-
we just got a bunch of wooden half pikes or whatever for bikes. I don't know what you call
well,
those.
I guess you're just not seeing the whole park when you're there, because like up in the corner, the jump line up there is the one that's proposed. We got the one here, which is even better than that one. And the trail through the trees is a completely elevated trail. Ours has obstacles throughout it, but ours looks more like through the trees and through there. But I had not heard any
maybe I
feedback
didn't
that it was
see the
different.
obstacles and stuff, because I've seen the jump parts, but that's all that I've really seen is just
Yeah,
kind
it's-
of the
it's pretty
jump parts
enormous,
in the
so-
red mud area. Okay.
Yeah.
So you guys have gotten great feedback and
hmm
okay.
Councilmember Grant?
I was curious about that first event that's going to be held there, the Cyclocross.
hmm
Is that something that is like local, regional?
Bike One here in town is organizing it. They are registering people through them. Do you know much about it, Jason? It's run through our rec division. I'm more of a construction manager, so I don't really know that event. We can get you some information. Veronica Tracy's our rec superintendent. She's been working with them to.
We just did a similar event that's kind of like that at the skate park, and it was very successful with
Nice.
with rollerblades. And so these are the type of things that were originally concepted along with these parks, but we had hit a pandemic, and now we're finally feeling comfortable rolling some of these events out. But we're getting a lot of feedback at the skate park just this last Saturday. There was a couple hundred people that came by and just watched that event, and it was cool watching people on rollerblades,
Pro level.
utilizing the park and doing things, tricks that,
Yeah.
you know, us normal humans cannot do.
So you could foresee in the future more of these types of events taking place.
Hopefully.
And so it's like free to use though to each of these organizations.
I think with this one, the deal they've worked out is they're going to do some post-event trail maintenance and cleanup and stuff in lieu of renting the park. So it just kind of depends on on what they can bring to us. Yeah.
Okay.
Councilmember Sedley?
I've seen motorcycles out there. Are
They're not
they-
allowed by
That's
signage, so someone wants to call it in, it can be enforced because it's by signage. No motorized vehicles are allowed there.
They're
That's,
doing some sick tricks, but.
yeah. Not built for them. They're the ones that will ruin the park if they're out there.
Will it
Yeah,
ruin?
yeah.
Okay.
It's not built for that. The one down by the river is built for that. It's a much bigger area. You can land and jump a lot better. This is built strictly for earth bikes. So
Okay. Any other questions?
Oh, I did want to ask one other thing. The group that's coming out, so like you had people that came out that were doing like rollerblades and stuff at the skate park. Is the group that's coming out, are they like a group that's specifically does tricks? Like they know that they're about to do some jumps and catch some air and all that kind of stuff?
Question, so it's a competition, so it would be
Okay.
be something similar to the
Ooh.
inline skating
yeah,
group that came out to the skate park.
What is this again?
it's called Cyclocross.
A win?
It's
Oh man, you would.
October. She told me 17th, 14th maybe. Is that a
All right.
15th, 22nd? I think it's the
I love
weekend
some
of the 22nd.
competition.
And it's cool it's cool. Like some of the stuff is, you know,
The X Games.
I think it's
Yeah,
the 22nd.
exactly.
it's
Exactly.
really amazing.
This is the live BMX games in Ward 1, ladies
Right,
and
there you
gentlemen.
go. You can just Facebook Live it.
So it is like a spectator thing. You expect quite a few people to be
People can
watching.
come out and watch.
Yep, they expect people, like I said, that's why they're kind of working on a deal with the
With the businesses
parking lots
to
around
park.
there, because they assume people will want to park
Yeah.
around too, and I'm sure they're more than happy to, yeah, heck yeah, come get a tattoo afterwards, so.
Or a massage.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we might have to look at trying to acquire one of those lots if the
There
park
you go.
gets more popular in the future.
Yeah, we assumed someone would build a pro shop somewhere around there, but they haven't done it yet, but, you know, there was discussions.
Do you know, is it one owner that owns that whole strip mall? Or the
I don't know, I know.
whole area where the alleyway is?
For some reason, I think the Surveys group owns it.
All of it?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they may have, all the undeveloped ones, obviously, I think the garage there was sold off to that owner, and maybe the daycare, but.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the update. I just was curious about the status of it now that it's 3 years old, and if there were any issues that we needed to be aware of, or if there was, additions or
Well,
funding issues or maintenance problems or whatever that we're experiencing with it or anything like that. So
We might want to build a pump track somewhere in town coming up next, which is a, kind of a rolling terrain, built all in asphalt, kind of loop trail. We've looked for, it could fit in this park, might fit in, we're getting ready to master plan Andrews Park, and the skate park is there. Originally, the skate park design had a pump track up on the north end, but we popped that out at public meetings in favor of the mini ramp up there at the top. But yeah, we're looking for a pump track at some point, so that'd be something that maybe the bike committee brings forward next, is look for some funding. It always makes sense to do it through room tax, 'cause that way we're not dipping into funds that could be used for other departments or anything. It's just sort of, that's park only kind of stuff for us.
yeah, well, whatever need to be cut out of the skate park or this, yeah, I'd be interested to hear about if we have funding, if we can put some of it back in. So appreciate it, James.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Our next item on the agenda is a discussion regarding the disaster debris management program. We have city staff here.
Good
with
afternoon,
presentation.
Mr. Chairman, council members. I try not to follow the Department of Fun in these presentations, but we're
Where's your
gonna,
cyclocross?
we're gonna make disaster fun today, and emergency management. Let's just see if we can get that up, Jim. Where's that little thing? Okay, let me introduce first Joe Hill. I don't know if you've met Joe, our streets program manager. Catherine Schuler, you met.
We're friends.
You've had a liaison with Mr. Hill on, so Joe's has a big job. He manages all of your street system, street maintenance projects, bridge projects. He has lots of things that he's responsible for. One of our bright young staff members in Public Works doing a great job. And in other duties as assigned, he is our debris manager. So I think I told you that when we hired you. Anyway, we're going to talk to you about the disaster debris management program. It looks like this. Council adopted this over 10 years ago, and we need to update it. So that's why we're here today, to tell you where we're at. Joe and our teams, a large city team, David Grizzle is in the back area here from our fire department emergency management coordinator. I think you know this, but our emergency manager for the city is the fire chief. So Chief King is the official emergency manager, and we sort of work within Chief King's command, and David works, of course, with us on emergency management, and debris management is a big part of that. We'll talk you through kind of what debris management looks like, and then so I'm going to kick it off here, and Joe's going to do the heavy lifting of telling you where we are. Let me go back to that. Couple really good pictures here. We are a place that gets crazy weather. You all know that. I've been blamed. My friend Judd Foster used to blame me for all the bad weather, because my first year on the job in '07 we had 5 disasters. My first one was 2 weeks into the job, then we had 3 floods, and then we ended up with an ice storm in December. But that was the biggest ice storm in our history that anyone could remember, and it was a monster. We learned a lot. This plan came out of that. And then almost less than 2 years ago, almost coming up on exactly 2 years ago, we had another one that was actually bigger in volume, a little bit less in cost, but a monster ice storm in October of 2020. So these are real things. I've been here 16 years, and I think we've had 18 disaster declarations. I stopped counting after a while. So one of my favorite quotes: by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. That's what emergency managers live by, and that's what we live by in terms of our debris program. We're here to kind of talk you through how we are trying to prepare for the next one. It's going to come in some form. Take you through a few real slides. Again, this is from '07. This is just a regular neighborhood. The entire city looked like this. It was a war zone. It was Armageddon. And this happened in a span of about 24 hours. On December 8th, it was dry and fairly clear, cool. It was starting to get cold, but we weren't really thinking about a full-blown winter. And then out of nowhere, like happens here in Oklahoma, came a freezing rain. And you can notice, in fact, it was the street, one of Joe's predecessors, Greg Hall, Brenda Hall's husband, who was our street superintendent at the time, came to me and he said, "I'm really worried." And I said, "Why is that? It's just another ice storm, Greg." And he said, "No, there's leaves on the trees, O'Leary. There's leaves on the trees. If this thing comes and the temperature drops, it can be really bad." I had no idea what he was talking about. And even Greg didn't fully grasp the scale of this monster. So in 24 hours, this is what this street came to look like, and most of Norman as well. It's all over. This is one of the worst residential cases that I could find in our picture files. But a lot of residences looked like this: front yard, backyard. You couldn't get to your front door. I couldn't get to my front door. I had a lot of oak trees down in my house. Damage to vehicles, damage to houses, damage to roofs. This was just a really rough event that came upon us very quickly, and we had to respond to it. And then within a few days, this is actually in the October 2020 event, not a great picture, but you can kind of see the big pile of vegetative debris. So within a few days, this is what accumulates along the curbs on every street in Norman, and they're waiting for us to come pick it up. This is debris management right here, and this is what it looks like, particularly after an ice storm. So a little bit of history. Again, council adopted this plan in 2009. You know, we came away from that 2007 storm realizing that we were not prepared, way not prepared. We didn't have a plan. None of my staff had ever been through it. I had never been through it like that. We didn't have pre-positioned contracts. We didn't have press releases. We were really flat-footed. It took us about 3 weeks to just get started. And Joe will talk you through that, kind of how we get started much quicker now. We had emergency council meeting on December 24th, I think the day before Christmas, because everyone was leaving for Christmas and we had to get council to approve our contracts, and that was the last chance we had to do that. So it was just an awful experience. We stumbled through it, got it done, finished up the cleanup in May of 2008. So December 9th, 2007, it took us 5 months plus to dig ourselves out of this mess. And one of the things we said to ourselves among this council and staff was, we're not going to let that happen again. We're going to be more prepared next time. So we needed to have a plan, and that's where this came from. Worked on it for over a year, and council adopted that in July of 2009. One of the first recommendations is to have pre-positioned contractors on call. So you will have already taken bids from contractors. Council would have already awarded the contracts for pre-positioned contractors. And what we have after that, so I think we did that in the fall of '09. We had our first pre-positioned contracts in the fall of '09. And what that means is that Joe and I carry around this cell phone number. Our contractor is in Austin, Texas. Our number one firm is in Austin, Texas. And we literally never leave this place without that cell phone on speed dial. And if that happened tonight, if something happened tonight, a tornado or something like that, we would be calling that agency at all hours of the day saying, okay, just had an event, you need to be here in 24 hours or less to help us begin assessing. In 48 hours, we need you to start moving equipment and getting ready, and in less than a week, we need to be picking up debris. In '07, it took us a month to pick up the first pile of debris. So we're pretty quick, we're pretty ready now, and we've called on this contract several times, actually 12 times. In fact, I remember joking with council at the time saying, listen, I appreciate the chance to prepare this report and get us all trained, but I hope we never have to use it. I never imagined using this thing 12 times in the next, 13 years. So almost once a year, if you look at it that way. 12 different major debris events since that, the adoption in July of '09. That has equated to about $14 million in recovered federal disaster relief, which is another reason to have this. We are in a good position with FEMA because they know we are really ready and prepared. The most recent one was that October 2020 ice storm, and we recovered about $3.9 million in FEMA reimbursement at the end of that whole event. I think that came in about 5.2 or 5.3 million for the total cost of that program, the whole debris cleanup, and the city paid the difference, of course. And then council approved this contract with the same firm. It was called Beck Disaster Relief back in '09. They converted over to Tetra Tech LLC, same group, same company. You allowed us to hire them in January of this year to update, and Joe and the team, and really every city department has been working on this ever since. So we're here today to kind of tell you what we have done, what the changes are, what the improvements are, and hopefully you'll be in a position to adopt this plan in the next 30 days or so. I'll finish on this note. I think this is my last one. I'll finish on this note that we have it all here. We have every weather
The Twin
thing.
Bridges.
I still can't believe it.
Overflowed.
I've been through more of this since I've been in Norman than in my previous 23 years in public works. But we have had all these things. So we've had tornadoes. I think there's been 5 in the city limits in those intervening 12 years or 13 years, 5 different tornadoes, multiple ice storms, multiple floods, some really serious floods. You can see the screen here of this. I don't know what street this is, but this was from a flood.
Twin Bridges.
That is the Twin Bridges, okay.
That's the
And then-
highest I've ever seen the lake.
Yeah,
It was like over the drain for the first
we've
time.
got another one in here that kind of shows that, yeah. This was one of our tornadoes in 2010. We had another one come right over this building in 2012 and damage my truck. It didn't hit the building.
Oh, yeah, you did put microburst on there. I was gonna say that's the microburst.
Microburst and all over, straight line winds. We've had a blizzard on Christmas Day. I remember them all. Of course, winter storms are notorious. And we do snow and ice control every winter, almost on a routine basis, but sometimes that can get pretty severe.
Are there any heat-related, like streets? Is that considered to be a disaster if heat's caused the streets to buckle or things like that?
That's a great question. Joe's been struggling all summer with
Right.
what we call pop-ups, concrete pop-ups, and you've seen them. In fact, you saw something on your agenda recently where the concrete really expands. It has nowhere to go. The joint is full, and it literally pops up. And I've seen these literally explode in concrete while a car is traveling down the road. They can be dangerous. I don't know that I would call them disasters, but there surely were a lot more of them this summer because of the excessive heat.
Definitely a nuisance.
So winter and spring, would you say, are really the heavy-duty disaster times for us?
That's probably right. Certainly spring, fall, winter, certainly we had some fall events. Our worst flood was actually on August 19th.
Yeah, I
Our
guess
next
flooding,
worst
yeah.
flood was on May 18th, I think, in the first week in June. So it's hard to know what's going to happen, but those seem to be the periods when it really takes place. So I'm going to hand off to Joe, and he'll take you.
Right. As Sean stated, really the key purpose of this plan is to be prepared. If we're prepared, we can be efficient, and if we're efficient enough, we can be effective, quickly getting to the next step. One of the big items that I highlighted here is, I don't want to call it luck, but as luck would have it, you'll notice in Kentucky at the end of July they had major flooding. Nationally, we've had a lot of very interesting weather events over the last few months. But mid to late August, I received 2 phone calls soliciting for reference for one of our debris removal contractors from Kentucky. So, as Sean stated, back in 2007, it was 4 to 5 weeks before they started cleanup. Imagine being in Kentucky in mid-August after all that flooding, and they still didn't have a plan, still didn't have things lined out to start their cleanup. So that's really the purpose of the disaster debris management plan, is we're prepared, and it saves a lot of trouble. Generally speaking, the changes to the plan were minimal. Same structure. So again, Tetra Tech Inc., who has a lot of staff members that were involved in the original plan that was built, helped us starting in January to complete this update. Every event is different, and so a few of the major changes, incidents and assumptions have been updated to represent our population and land-based changes since the city's grown over the last 13 years. 2 of the major scenarios that we use as examples in the packet that you guys have, you'll be able to see those, is a tornado and ice storm event. Those are very common debris generating events, but also they are good examples of the different type of impacts an event can have. So when you talk about an ice storm, it's mostly vegetative debris, a lot of trees and branches, big piles, but we're able to mulch that and utilize that. And it goes decently smooth. But when you have a tornado, you have a whole different ball game, essentially. So you'll have vegetative debris. You also have structural construction debris like shingles, framing, brick. And then you'll also have white goods, which are personal items, electronics, refrigerators. And when you get into that situation, you have a different process for each type of debris, different storage requirements, different requirements for getting rid of those items. And so we updated our debris management sites as well. So we added some locations and retained a few pre-existing locations. And updates to the local, state, and federal regulations that have just come down the pipe over the years. A couple of those that are very important to highlight. Number one, there's no more incentive. There used to be an incentive through the PA program that would allow 5% extra if you had an approved and adopted debris management plan. They have removed that as of a few years ago, and simply because having one of these plans is really the standard, and everyone should have one.
I would say we lobby for that every year when we bring our interest to our federal partners, that we'd like to see more incentivization in the debris program. It just hasn't come back.
And then additionally, the private roads and gated communities was a topic in the 2020 storm. And I'm sure it was a topic in every event previously as well. But the public assistance program and policy guidelines did come out with a little bit more guidance recently. Generally, the stance is that it is still ineligible for federal reimbursement, but there have been times in limited circumstances where you can get approval and those will be deemed eligible. And we can help out those private communities as well. This slide here is really just to show you the amount of people involved when one of these events takes place. It's an all hands on deck coordination. Communication between every department and every staff member involved is key. But one of the big takeaways that I have from this whole process, I have not had to implement this plan since I've been in my position, and we're gonna hope that it stays that way for a little while. But biggest takeaway is we really have to work to set the expectations with our public and manage our emotional response when something like this happens. Of course, it's very taxing, both physically and emotionally, but good communication, good public outreach, and sharing the story and setting those expectations, especially in a point-and-click world, is going to be key to success throughout. Attached here is just an example of a emergency proclamation that took place. When was this one?
I think this was the December 2015 ice storm. So just wanted to illustrate, council has a major role. One of the first things we will come to you and the mayor with is a proclamation declaring a disaster. That's the first thing we have to do. Then the state does it, and then the president does it in that order. And all those things have to happen in sequence. As I mentioned, this pre-positioned contractor, within 24 hours, we will know if we have reached disaster thresholds in terms of damage. And we will come to you and the mayor. There's been special meetings. Sometimes the mayor has approved this on her own, Mayor Rosenthal in this case in 2015, and then council would ratify it. It's really important that we get this declaration so we can begin to document that, okay, we are now major disaster status. All of our departments then channel all their purchasing through that same system. That's one of the programs David works with, and that way we keep track of all of our expenses to then get reimbursed later, we hope. So just one example of, want to point out your role. Your role is critical. This is another, maybe the major role, at least for me and I think Joe, when it happens, unfortunately, it is going to happen. But public information is so critical, and this is where your phones will ring off the hook, our phones will ring off the hook. We have everyone in the city working the phones and Action Center and so on, because people are upset, they're worried, they're scared, they don't know what to do, they want help, and it's amazing the level of detail that you really have to think about and guide people. One of my favorites is, please do not put your pile of debris on a gas meter, because when we take that claw and get that debris, then we've now created a gas explosion. Little things like that I never thought about until I got into the debris business. Please don't make your piles longer than 12 feet. We can't put more than 12 feet in the truck. Things like this, and I think I spent every day writing press releases in the early storm. We didn't have a communications position at that time. So much of it is just getting the information out to these folks so they do it in the safe way, so we can then help them with that. This particular one was, I think this is when we had just gotten eligibility to come into the private streets. We have miles and miles of private streets, particularly in Ward 5, and we had never, ever been allowed to go into those areas and pick up debris until 2020. We got a special provision from FEMA to do that. So this is when we announced that, I think, on this particular press release. So again, information, as always, is so critical.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I guess, some more questions about
Sure.
that, because I think that that was something that really came up during that 2020 storm. I'm sure that it had come up prior to that. But when Joe was talking earlier about private roads, gated communities, I guess what is the percentage, or if you could put kind of a percentage of our community that falls into that category?
I meant to grab that. We did a full analysis, and I know I had the mileage. It was much bigger than I was thinking. But percentage of the city, I'm going to say it's less than 10%, maybe less than 5%.
I think so, yeah.
But still, lots of folks out, and these are in the rural areas. They've got more trees, they've got more debris generally, is what happens.
And so if I'm understanding it correctly, if FEMA doesn't approve us to go into the private roads, then we cannot collect that debris, period,
That's
even
correct.
if we
That's correct.
want to assist our residents in that capacity as a municipality.
Thank you for that question. So really the issue is, will FEMA reimburse us 75% for picking up that debris? The provision, you can imagine using public dollars in private property. That's just a no-no for whatever we do every day. FEMA's the same way. That's why they have that rule. What we've done back in '07, for instance, we had them bring it out to the public street. But if you've been to some of these neighborhoods, particularly in Ward 5, some of these private streets will go back a mile.
Right.
So they're gonna have to pick up that debris and carry it a mile. It's just not practical. And so yes, many of them back in the previous events hauled it themselves. I'll show you some pictures.
Yeah.
Lots of people hauling their own debris. But in 2020, we did have this provision. It came late. It came in December. We had already been picking up debris for a couple of months, and people were pretty pent up. Frankly, Councilmember Nash was pretty pent up at that time because he was getting beat on pretty hard by the residents. So this was an exception. Joe mentioned it. We're seeing a little bit more flexibility from FEMA, but if you read the regs very clearly, it's still prohibited. So we would start on that basis.
So we couldn't qualify for any kind of matching federal money, but would we be allowed to go in there and spend our own city money to do that particular removal on private roads or whatever? If we, as a city, deemed that it was okay, we would just offset that cost
Thank you.
ourselves.
I failed to mention that. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Okay.
And that's the question that we were really close to coming to in that particular event, that, okay, let's just go pick it up. We'll document it separately, and the city will pay that share. And we even calculated, I think, what it would cost. I think it was in the range of about $500,000, so.
Okay.
But that's a decision that council can always make.
Yeah, okay,
Absolutely.
just wanted to make sure that, like, there was clarification that, like, we're not prohibited from spending our own money
Not at all.
to help our own residents. We just couldn't get federal dollars to help alleviate
That's right.
okay.
That's right. And we would document it very carefully.
Without the city of Norman government, all of those folks would have been on their own though, right?
That's correct. Again, some of them can bring it out
Sure.
to, 48th Avenue, 72nd Avenue, that sort of thing, but many of them, it's just not practical.
But even then, if they weren't in the city limits of Norman, if they could bring it out to a public road, but we wouldn't be picking it up still, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So without the city of Norman, all those folks would be on their own to get rid of all that stuff.
That's correct.
Okay. Councilmember Grant?
So with the preparedness, like, some storms ahead of time are coming, like a tornado. Is there things that council can do, like knowing this thing is coming, to speed up the process?
Great question. I'm sure there is, Councilmember Wright. Again, like we say all the time, every storm is different. The aftermath of every storm is different. It's so hard to know what's going to happen. Is that tornado going to touch down? Literally, there was one over this building, and about the closest to death I think I've ever felt. My ears popped. I was in Building A. It didn't touch the building. It pulled my bed cover off my truck, and it knocked out 100-year-old trees in Andrews Park, but it never touched down. So there's another example. Tornadoes can be devastating, and then they can be like that one. You just don't know until it's done. But I think you're doing the right thing here by this plan, adoption of this plan, giving us the resources that we need to prepare, and then everything you do with emergency management, with Chief King to give them resources, David and others. I don't know, David, any thoughts?
The biggest thing I'd request of the council is to be involved in your emergency preparedness. Know the language, know the jargon, know the things that we need to tell people to do in terms of, what kind of things should they have ready and available during severe weather, and what kind of things do they need to be prepared. A few years ago, we had a real big push on safe rooms going in. And a lot of those safe rooms have become extra storage closets. And, those kind of things, batteries, just right off of ready.gov and checklist, or checklist full. I mean, that's just, you've got a pilot that goes down a checklist every time he sits in that seat, it's the same thing. And you forget some of the smallest, like Sean's talking about, the details. Before coming to Norman, I was with National Guard at the state headquarters, worked May 3rd tornado and several others. And the most fascinating thing that I have always observed of the community after a tornado is everyone that's affected is barefooted. And in our checklist, we need to say, those tennis shoes that you're about to throw away, let's put them in a preparedness bag, and those kind of things. So just get involved. We do a lot of community outreach throughout the years. I have a volunteer group, very involved, and just come out. Councilman Holman's been out to several of them, and come out and visit with your constituents.
And to go back to that, well, I was thinking about the proclamation thing that we have to do, so like it would be, have you sat through one actually? Like, I guess the 2021 would be most recent. What does that look like when the storm happens? Is like everybody in for 24-hour, like within 24 hours, we're all here doing that open meeting? Or
I don't know that, I can't recall if I've been requested to come to a special. I think in my time, we've had a meeting already scheduled.
Yeah, or we ratified.
Yeah.
I have to go back to my notes too, I think you're dead right, is that we had the mayor, whoever the mayor was, sign it as soon as it's ready. It's in the plan, by the way. We have the proclamation ready, we have these press releases ready, we have all this ready to go. But I think we would have had the mayor sign it. Catherine and her team would have helped us make sure it's all correct, and then it would have been ratified at the next council meeting. I think that's how we've done it.
So, yeah, I haven't been requested to come in on an emergency meeting or anything yet, so.
The initial emergency declaration is pretty templated out, and that, as you saw during COVID, that can be amended consecutively as the needs of the community change in terms of emergency situations where we had several changes for the proclamation during COVID. So, but the initial one is a pretty rapid fire process, and we get that in really quick.
The other thing council has done, which is critically important, and everyone's sort of forgetting about it, but is the Emergency Operations Center, the new one going in. In fact, it's going in right where we're going to show you the debris site here in a minute. That is so critical. We've spent a lot of time, David and I, at the EOC at Fire Station 7, and it's really not as equipped as it needs to be for any of these events. What you and the voters have done to fund the new EOC is critically important to these events. I want to mention, again, I think we do a good job with our public information. I always feel like we can do better. We always learn every time we go through this, but we've done frequently asked questions. These are great to hand out to people, send them to them, email them to them. We use them for our staff, so every phone answerer in City Hall has these sitting on their desk, so they have the right answer to the citizens when they call in. So we do a lot of really good public information when we're in the middle of these things, and that'll be good for you all to get your hands on, so when you're getting those questions, you have the answers as well.
Again, just another really key component of the plan is the pre-position contracts that we have in place. So we have TFR Enterprises Inc., which is one of our primary debris removal, D&J Enterprises, who is a debris removal contractor as well, and then Thompson Consulting Services, which is a monitoring firm. Each event is different, requiring very varied levels of service from each of these contracts. And on occasion, they can be amended, the contract can be amended as necessary. Debris monitoring is a lot more extensive than what it sounds like. Debris removal is pretty cut and dry. But the monitoring, you have to understand that, again, dependent on the type of storm, the type of debris that you have, there is a monitor with every unit that is out picking debris up. And they're monitoring the volume, the truck, making sure that that piece of equipment is accounted for, tracking the hours and operation of the staff for that unit. And then also at every debris management site, there is a monitoring tower that ensures every truck that comes in, leaves unloaded, that you are keeping track of those volumes. And that group is vital in our FEMA reimbursement. So they build all of that data for us. Dependent on the size of the storm, we can amend that contract to have them help us file for that FEMA assistance as well. And in turn, in the past, I know that we have also done some of this monitoring in-house. I don't think anytime recently though.
That'd be pretty small.
Storm, yeah, it has to be quite small for us to manage that in-house as well.
So the photo on the left is that tornado that I mentioned that came over here. I think it was April of 2012. The one that came over this building went right through the middle of Norman, kind of south, west, northeast. And then this is the Twin Bridges. This is the one I was thinking of.
And that's 24th
Nice
and
sunrise
Brooks.
view.
And that was the 2015, and that was about a 20-year-old
apartments.
bridge. I remember calling our friends at COMCD the day before and saying, man, is it possible that that water could go over that bridge? And he went, oh, there's no way. There's no way. They designed that 20 years ago. The next morning, I got this picture from Greg Hall. Fascinating. This was probably the worst flood in recent.
What's wild is just 4 years before this, the lake was at the lowest point I had ever seen it.
Yeah.
There was no water north of the bridge. All that was visible was the old river bed. That was the only water that was north of it. And the drain, you could, I think, see the bottom of the overflow drain. And then in this event, the overflow drain was it was being used, I think, maybe for the first or second time ever since the lake was built.
Yeah. This
So it's
diminished.
amazing how
This
it's
was
changed.
over the bridge for about a day-ish. When it finally went away, that we had about 24 inches of silt and mud to clean off the entire bridge before we could open it, and that was Joe's crew doing that. One of the more uncomfortable moments I have in these is taking these task orders to the city manager and asking him to sign it for $1.2 million. In this case, this is the 2020 ice storm. So when you all pass that proclamation and we have all of this in place, you are granting administrative authority to the city manager to keep us moving, not wait for the next council meeting, and then we ratify this the next time. So there have been some of these that have been big enough where I'm walking in there twice a week saying, Daryl, I need you to sign this one. We're going to get it back. We're going to get FEMA reimbursement, but trust me, it's just it's a very uncomfortable situation for all of us, but you got to do it. You can't wait. It would take weeks or months to wait for that money. We just have to go on a kind of wing and a prayer, and we've been very successful doing that. But that's kind of what the preposition contract says. It says, okay, we're going to do task orders. We're going to do $1 million at a time, 1.5 million, whatever is happening. We're going to get us going for another 2 weeks. to pay the contractor.
So let's talk about our debris management sites for a minute here. We had 2 pre-existing sites that we retained. We have the Hall Park site, which is north of our water treatment plant. Again, that site is developing, so we're working with our utilities group and also the emergency management. So you have the EOC and also the new water line maintenance facility that are going in on that site. So the acreage available has shrunk a little bit, but we still believe that is a good site for now that we can still have open. Franklin Road at 12th Avenue Northeast, very good, large site, open. It does have some floodplain on the south and west side of the property. And then we additionally have 2 new identified sites, 12th Avenue Northeast across from 12th Avenue Rec Center. There's a large open area up there, and then Falls Lakeview Park, which is another park out north of Lake Thunderbird, kind of in the peninsula there, that is also good open parkland that we can use. Very common to use parkland when needed. All of these sites are temporary. Temporary storage to expand the capacity when sanitation has reached its limit. They're activated on an as-needed basis and really based on location, size, and type of event that we have. And we have some.
This is that East Robinson site, so left of this frame would be the water plant, if you're familiar with that area. This is that site, the Hall Park site that Joe mentioned. Lots of additional temporary signage, getting people to the right place. The parcel we're looking at to the right is the EOC parcel, I think. That's where the EOC is going to be. So as Joe said, this will change for our next event. This was the 07, just to give you a sense of scale. This is one pile. Behind this are 3 more. But this was an example of, we did everything wrong that year because we didn't know what we were doing. We were just doing the best we could. And we decided that we would burn the debris, use a burn curtain, underground burn curtain to burn the debris. It was cheaper, faster. Unfortunately, a windstorm came up and it caught fire, and this whole thing, this is a mild picture. I brought in one of the milder ones. So the fire department, God bless them, came out and put out the fire. And that was the last time we burned debris on a debris storm. We learned our lesson. Seemed like a good idea at the time. But this was a scary day when that thing caught fire. The folks in Hall Park were pretty worried. But everything turned out okay. No one was hurt. But it's the stuff that happens. You really got to think your way through this. We mentioned a lot of people like to do their own thing. You've got to provide for that. They're not going to wait for us, whether they just want to do that or whether they live on a private street, whatever their deal. So we have had drive-through days. We do a lot of those. I think this was actually at East Robinson. We learned later you really can't mix private vehicles in these big trucks, so we don't do that there anymore. We do it at Griffin Park, work with our parks folks, and other places where we can set up big areas, and these folks come in with their piles, and we dump the trailer, and we build the pile, move the pile out to the other site, and away we go. Very popular service, and it's necessary. People want us to do this. It is an additional cost, additional staffing, typically do it on a Saturday, Sunday, if we can. Joe talked about monitoring, and I want to throw this one in. I think this is also from that 07 event, but it looks a lot the same for the others. See the tower in the background there, and you can kind of see the truck loaded approaching the tower. This is one example of monitoring. So we are working 7 days a week, usually, I'm going to say 12 or 13 hours a day on these events, and we monitor every stick that comes into the pile because we're paying them for that, and we're trying to get reimbursement from FEMA. So there are 2 monitors up in that tower. We built that tower, 2 monitors up in that tower. And when that truck comes in, we've already measured the truck. We have them all calibrated. And he is making an estimate of the cubic yardage of that truck from the tower. That's how we do that. And so they're sitting there all day long, tracking every truck that comes in, documenting, putting in a spreadsheet, mapping it, that sort of thing. We also have monitors with the trucks. So as that truck is going down my street or your street, he's standing there watching the truck, taking pictures of every pile that the truck picks up. It's a very intensive process, this monitoring business. You might not have ever seen a tub grinder. This is a big tub grinder. So when we got out of the burning business, we went to the grinding business, which is another pretty efficient way. It's not as efficient, a little more costly, but this is a big grinder that literally takes the heavy debris, grinds it up into mulch, puts it up the chute into the truck, and off we go with the mulch. If we can, we place the mulch on natural fields, if we can find landowners who will let us do that. We've used it as daily cover at a landfill. We've tried lots of different things to get rid of the mulch. It's hundreds of cubic yards, thousands of cubic yards of mulch, and it's kind of hard to get rid of after a while. So we've done everything you can do to get rid of the mulch cheaply and with less hauling if we can. We'll give it away for years, but literally you would have a decade of free mulch, and by that time it'd be a nuisance. But this is kind of how we deal with the disposal or the breaking down of the big, heavy debris.
Multiple sources for reimbursement. Our primary source is the FEMA Public Assistance Program, but I just wanted to show that there are different options out there. Each program has different documentation requirements, different criteria that you compare with the type of storm that you have. If you don't recognize in the photo, that is Lahoma, south of Maine.
Yep.
So,
Behind MPS.
Probably on MPS, right?
yeah.
Councilor Schuler?
With these potential reimbursement, I guess, sources, can you double dip? Can you apply to multiple of them and potentially get funding, or is it typical that you're going to get funding from
It's a
one?
great question. Usually you're not able to double dip unless it's a different function. And really, it's a good time to say this. Floods generally don't create debris events, rarely. A flood is a whole nother set of disaster issues that we deal with, and you can see it here. It's another major event that happens here. The FHWA Emergency Relief Program was one that we used for a flooding event that would not be available for debris.
Okay.
So, yeah, great question. I stumbled on this morning. We added a few slides this morning to the one that you had previously received, but I'd forgotten about this one. So this is, if you want to get the scale of what happened in December of 2007, I still think this is the biggest one ever. But we all had issues, and this was an ACOG helped us assemble the damage in Oklahoma City metropolitan area. Oklahoma City had $9.8 million in expenses. We had right at $6 million in Norman, so we were right up there. Midwest City had 4.7. The total just to deal with debris, this is just debris, this is not roads, bridges, all the other things that we had to deal with, was $28 million. We were able to get 75% reimbursement generally, most of us were, so about $21 million. The state then comes in usually about a year later, but they do come in with 12.5% on most events. And so the city of Norman was down to 3.5 million, or the area was 3.5 million. City of Norman was down to 756,000, which is still a big number. I don't mean to minimize that.
Fortunately, we were the most impacted by that storm.
We really were.
I mean, Oklahoma City is 600 plus square miles.
Yeah.
So,
And I gotta say, my friends in Oklahoma City, I was in my first year on the job here, so I was making lots of friends. But they really helped us. They were really good at debris management before we were, and we learned a lot from them, and they helped us through that process. And actually, the city of Moore has gotten pretty good at it too, for obvious reasons. So just wrap up here. You have a copy of the draft there, no hurry. It's not exactly easy reading, but we'd be happy to take questions if you get through that and you have some questions. We'd like to come back to council as soon as possible and get this thing adopted, and then we would send it to FEMA and get it re-entered into Norman's plan for the next 10 years. Frankly, this time of year we get a little nervous. Bad things happen in October, bad things happen in November, bad things happen in December. So we think we'd like to have this adopted in the next few weeks, next few meetings if we can. You never know, but we'd like to be ready. Lots of internal planning that goes on. David's group does tabletop exercises, so this is, once something like this gets adopted, his group and Chief King might assemble a tabletop exercise with all of the city departments. Council might be involved in that. We have to practice in real life practicing, instead of just looking at the document. And then it is never too early to begin permitting those debris sites. Joe showed you the 4 sites. Each of those requires a state permit for stormwater erosion control and other permits. We always want to get those permits kind of teed up so that the day it happens, we're running up to DEQ and getting those things permitted so we can pick up debris in the next few days. So David said, I don't know what the words he used, but when this happens, it is a crisis. It is, you have to move fast, you have to be ready. Our citizens have high expectations. They expect us to be out there picking up their stuff in 3 or 4 days. It's just we've created a monster in a way. We're really proud of our monster, but our citizens are used to good service. They want their stuff picked up and taken away free. And so you've got to be ready to do that, and that's what I think this plan does for us.
Councilor Shu.
So this is the first time that this document has been updated?
Yes.
Since 2009?
Yeah,
Okay.
roughly 10 years is what they
Is
recommend.
that's typical?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you were talking about some of like the permitting of like the sites and things like that. Do we have to do that on an annual basis, or do those permits have longer lifespans?
I think most of them are good for 2 years, but it's really an event-driven thing,
Okay.
that we are ready for that event. And again, the beauty of this plan, Joe said it well, is depending on what happens, if it's a tornado or an ice storm, or if it's an East Norman or West Norman or North Norman, whatever, we sort of are nimble in this plan to say, okay, let's use this site for that one because that's a shorter haul distance, so we wouldn't need to permit the other 3, that kind of thing.
Okay, so what's the process, I guess, for the preliminary permitting? So you get the final permitting when like the event happens?
Yeah.
Okay.
Most of that really is stormwater related, Councilmember. We're gonna get that stormwater pollution protection plan permit teed up and sort of get all the information filled in. And then if we need it, we're ready to go immediately instead of gathering all that data and the maps and all that.
Got it. So all of that is really just a plan for the permitting
Exactly.
that you're going to submit?
Exactly.
Okay.
And the state's great. The state works with us. They're fast. They know we're in trouble and they're here to help us pretty quickly. But everything takes time. It's not uncommon to have 12, 20 staff members from various departments doing nothing but this. We basically stop maintaining streets. That's what happens. We take all of our people and put them on the project until we catch up, and then we go back to our regular duties. So this is all hands on deck, like Joe said, in the initial week or 2 or month or so. Again, depending on what the event is. We've had we've had small ones and big ones, and you just never know. Each storm is different.
Okay, switching gears a little bit. So I know that with the last one in October of 2020, it is on the resident to get their debris to the street or to the public right of way.
Yeah.
Right? Are there any assistance programs for people within our community that, don't have the capacity to do that, like our elderly population or
John, if I
people that are
may.
disabled?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Individual assistance under the State Emergency Management Agency works with what they call VOAD, Volunteer Organizations Acting in Disasters. What we normally do is try to work through them, and they'll bring in, you may have heard of the Southern Baptist Chainsaw Gangs. We've got a lot of local groups that will come together and help out on their own. And that's one of the things that the new EOC, creating in 2010 when we had the tornado that walked down Highway 9 and took out the marina. And one of the things we had at Station 7 was a mock-up call center. People could call into the EOC and say, I've got 85-year-old grandma, she's got a big log on her door, she needs help. And we would work our volunteer groups and send them out to assist in that regard. And that's really the best way to do it. And it also, it helps us kind of track who's out there
Yeah.
working. In 2015, we had the Shirt of the Day Club with the volunteer groups. There were massive churches on a mission, 2-week mission. We had a lot of civilians. We had some safety issues.
Yeah.
And when it's not managed, then it becomes a bigger problem. So that's how we do this. We normally work through local organizations that go out and help the community.
So the best way to get that information out is through contacting like our EOC or the
Yeah,
city,
probably our
like the Action Center.
Again, everything
Action
counts through the
Center,
Action Center.
Initially.
Yeah. Okay.
Until we start gathering the information of what organizations are available and when they're available and exactly what will they do, those kind of things. Boy Scouts will always be out there. A lot of church groups go out to Southern Baptist. So it's kind of a snowball effect. I mean, once it happens, people start helping their neighbors and then people start coming in, and then the better we manage that, the more response we can provide to the community.
United Way is another great partner. They've been great, RSVP, all the other agencies they work with. And remember, too, when these are happening, we might be out of power for 10 days. We might have gas lines broken. There's other stuff happening that people need help with beyond just the debris
Right.
event. And so this is what David and his team and Chief King do. They're the lead emergency managers, and so much of what we do as a city is facilitating those resources. Working with OG&E to get our water plant back in service. I forget which event it was that took our water plant power out for a day or two, Chris. I forget which one that was, but that's scary stuff when you lose power to your plants and that sort of thing. So we're working lots of angles. Debris is just one small, frankly, part of this bigger emergency management picture.
Sure. I knew the answer was yes. I just was really trying to understand what the best way for people, like, to get that information out. And I think that goes back to, like, you saying that a good way for us to be involved is to get that information out to our residents and to provide, you know, clarity of, like, this is what's happening. These are who, the people that you need to get in contact with. Because I think
Sean mentioned earlier about him having to become his own PIO, and basically that's what we used to do.
yeah.
And you go to a class and get trained to do that, and then the admin of the communication officer within City Hall, where that kind of information can be centralized, focused, it can be managed, it can be reviewed before it's distributed, because many years before that, you'd have one department putting something out, and then another department would have current information over that department, and then this person said that, and it was really a cluster. So the fastest way to handle all that is to form that joint information center, and everybody feed their data into that information center. It goes through the proper channels for release through the city manager and the mayor, and now we have a common operating picture about what we're doing.
Yeah.
Tiffany Verska has been on this team. I don't know that she's been through one of these in her career, but she's been really attentive to this
She
plan.
came from Lawton, which she has emergency management experience. And also, I'll take just a moment of your time. Joe admitted to me in an alternate life that he had to deal with FEMA on issues and things. We kind of skipped right past the reimbursement and funding issue, but FEMA has changed drastically over the years in reimbursements as much as they changed drastically and continue to change in the debris field and everything else. And we saw in this last disaster, we're looking at the need of having to extend some of these contracts and bringing contractors in to do the administration to gain the reimbursement, because the massive amount of documentation, every one of those piles that you saw referenced has to be geocoded. It has to have a 4-sided picture. There's 4 pictures of every pile of debris that has to be taken. Massive amount of data gets put into the contractor system at the time, and then they gave us a big download. So now you have a bunch of stuff. Now you got to take that and turn it into FEMA-E's. And I'm an army of one. And so Anthony Francisco was gracious enough to give us one of his new guys last time, and he was a whiz on the new system, Munis system. We have new software accounting systems, FEMA. We put it all in now. Used to, they would send FEMA. When's FEMA coming to town? FEMA ain't coming to town no more. So we have to do all that now. So we're the next step. Let's talk about next step. The next step is to follow through for the reimbursement And it's just really grown beyond the ability for us to do it internally,
Interesting.
especially when you're talking 9 and 10. I did pretty much all of it on my own up to about 2010. And then the 2010 storm was over $10 million total. And that was when I had to scream, cry wolf, get help.
Thank you. Sorry to ramble on here, but appreciate your time.
Any other comments, questions from you?
Thanks.
Okay, well, I'm definitely in favor of the whole council seeing this and moving it forward as fast as possible. So I
definitely.
appreciate the update, and I look forward to, the whole council getting a look at it, so.
Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
all right, that was our last item on the agenda. Are there any final comments or anything from the committee? Okay, then we are adjourned.